Okay, so now that you have downloaded the zip file and extracted it, I hope it's in your GameMaker folder in your OneDrive where it's supposed to be. You need to open the game. However, you cannot just double click on this and open the game because we have some issues going on with GameMaker right now. So instead, you need to open GameMaker and then click Open. And now navigate to your GameMaker folder inside of Summative Review until you get to the game, and it will open for you. So you can look through the existing assets. We have some objects, a couple of rooms, a few sprites, but the first thing you're going to do is create a sprite with these criteria. The size should be 16 pixels wide, 32 pixels tall. It should be a blue rectangle with a white border, and it should be called Player. When you do your blue rectangle with the white border, try to do that with as few keystrokes as possible, and do not use the paint bucket to fill the rectangle in. So here's my player sprite. This is what your player sprite should look like. 16 by 32, a blue rectangle with a white border, and it should be centered. The origin should be middle center. And the name is player. Second, you're going to use that sprite to create a player object. Make sure that you name it properly. Then you will add these events. Now you have to determine exactly which events you're going to add, but you should understand that by the criteria that's listed here. You need 3 user-defined variables: SPD equal to 5, player lives equal to 3, and HP equal to 3. In a second event, 60 times a second, you should check for HP less than 1. When HP is less than 1, you should reduce the lives by 1. Then make sure that you're not out of lives. So if the number of lives is now less than 1, then you should send your user to the game over room. Otherwise, you should set HP back to 3. You'll code the 4 arrow keys so that as long as an arrow is held down, your player will move according to the speed variable in the correct direction. When you run into an enemy object, you should lose 1 HP and return to your start position. Here's a hint. Your start position is held in the ordered pair X start, Y start. The X value is X start and the Y value is Y start. Now we've done something similar to this using X previous and Y previous, but the ordered pair X previous, Y previous simply takes you back in time 1 step. We want to return to our original position at the start of the game. And finally, when you reach the bottom of the screen and you leave the room, your player should get an extra life and be returned to your start position. That is your player object. Make sure you code a little, test a little, make sure that everything is working as you work along, and that is your player object. Next, you're going to open the BG_game over sprite. That is our game over background. And you're going to change that image from the one that I have placed in it to the image that is being held in the Assets folder. Inside the Assets folder, there is an image called Game Over. It's a JPEG. You're going to use that image instead of the sprite that I have on the BG underscore Game Over. So you're going to replace the sprite I have with the Game Over sprite. When you're finished, your Game Over room will look like this automatically because I've already assigned that sprite as the background image in this room. So you can see that right here is the Game Over image that I've assigned to the room, and yours should look exactly like this. While we're talking about rooms, I want you to open the room called Room 1 and rename it Level 1. I want you to change its background color to a nice light blue without using a sprite. I want you to add an instance layer called Player. That should be with a capital P, by the way. All of your layers should be named with a capital P. I want you to place your player object on it. And when you do, place it at the top of the room, kind of in the center, not too far from the top of it. Then I want you to add an instance layer just above background called Boundaries and add exactly 2 boundary objects. I want them stretched so that they cover the left and right sides, and only the left and right sides. No more than 2 objects. By the time you get done with player, your game should be running like this. So if you run into an enemy object, it should automatically send you back to the top. Now we are losing health, but you can't really tell that until I get to Game Over. That's because you actually have to hit 9 enemies before the game is over, because you get 3 health for each life that you have. So if your game isn't working that way, you need to fix it. Next, you're going to create the enemy sprite. Now, I've been using a placeholder, but you're actually going to import an animated sprite from a sprite sheet. It should be called Enemy. The sprite sheet you're going to pull from is called Blob. It's a PNG in the Assets folder that you were provided. You're going to pull just the top row of images from that sprite sheet. So just the top 4 images. Those are going to be the images where the blob is moving to the left. The size of the images should be set to 56 by 56. The rest of the settings you should be able to do. Once you get that imported, you need to remove the white background from each frame. Make sure you don't leave any white squares just kind of hanging around the edges. Clean it up nice and tight so that you bring it down to that black and gray outline that's around the outside. And then finally, set the frames per second to 10. Just a hint, you will have to close the sprite editor before you can find where to change the frames per second. So now, when you run it, your enemies should look like this. Notice they're always facing left. We're going to leave them that way. until the very, very end of this project, and then I'll let you fix them for some extra credit. But don't waste time on the extra credit right now, because if you don't have everything finished, you won't get credit for the extra credit. No. Next, you're going to draw a sprite to be used for the lives. This sprite must be in the shape of a heart. It has to be created very specifically. So make sure you're paying attention to these instructions before you start. 1, you're going to call it heart. It should be 32 by 32. As you draw it, make sure that you fill that entire image size. Don't make it really small. You're going to draw this heart by first drawing just half of the outline of the heart shape. Make sure that it reasonably looks like half a heart. Then make a paintbrush of that half heart shape. Flip that paintbrush and paint the other half of the heart. And finally, choose the paint bucket and fill the heart in with red. Make sure you have a nice red heart and that I can see your half heart paintbrush, or you will not get credit for this. So when you're finished, your sprite should mostly fill that 32 by 32 square, and I should clearly see your paintbrush for half the heart. Again, if I don't see the paintbrush for half the heart, you will not receive credit. Now, go ahead and use this sprite in the obj_lives object that has been provided for you. And again, run your game. Make sure there are no errors in your game, except there is one little problem. The hearts don't show up, and they should by this point. So here's my game, and I've created my live sprite and I've changed it to that heart, but my lives are not showing up. However, if you look at the controller you were provided, clearly those lives are being drawn, and they're being drawn properly. There's my obj_player.lives. Remember, I can access a variable name using the dot operator on the object that the variable belongs to. So all of this code is completely correct. So why is it not showing up when our game is run? You need to figure that out on your own. Okay, so once you get your lives to appear, look, they're all overlapping. So they're clearly drawn too closely together. I want you to fix that. I want them separated a little bit, not a lot, not spread throughout the room, because we're going to be able to gain more lives as we play our game properly and win. And so you need to be able to add more and more hearts along here as the game is played. But I do expect them to be spaced out. So I'd like the lives to be spread out, something like this, not too far apart, because again, we need to be able to add more lives to them as we win our game. That's assuming you're better than I am. I generally lose quite quickly. So you're trying to make it to the bottom without running into enemies. Notice that every 3 times you run into an enemy, you lose a life. And when you lose all 3 lives, the game is over. So let's see if I can do that better. Up, up. Maybe I'll want to make it easier. Oh, I gained a life back. Did I? Down to 1 life. Yep. Okay. If you're as bad at playing this as I am, you might want to go into your room and remove some of those enemies. That's what I'm going to do. So let's see if this is any easier for me. I'm trying to make it all the way to the bottom without running into enemies. Now I can move over left and right, and I tend to forget about that. Down to 1 life. I got 1 life back, but I lost it. Was never very good at Frogger either. Same idea. Just make sure that you play your game long enough that it's actually working, that you can get a life back if you get all the way down to the bottom, and that you get the game over if you lose all 3 lives. Like I said, if you'd like to remove some of those enemies to make it easier to win, by all means, feel free to do that. Now that you're all done, start thinking about how you would get that sprite to face the direction that it's moving. It's not as easy as it sounds, but give it some thought. If you have an idea, make sure you save your game before you go messing around with it so that what you submit works. Right now, go to File, Save Project As, and rename it properly with your period number. Then, when you're ready to submit, go to File, Export Project, create your YYZ, and make sure that you submit the YYZ file. Let me know if I can help you.